Hello, I'm Herman Eberhardt, the Supervisory Museum Curator at the Franklin Roosevelt Presidential Library and Museum, back again to talk about some of the interesting artifacts in our museum collection. Today we'll be looking at the story behind this small group of objects, not the type of things you'd normally expect to find at a presidential library. Here we have a dog's food bowl, a rubber ball, and a stuffed sock. So what can these objects possibly have to do with Franklin Roosevelt? Well, they all belong to a dog named Fala, who belonged to FDR and lived at the White House. And here is Fala's White House dog tag to prove my point. There you can see his name and the White House etched into the metal. And this is Fala, who, as you can see, was a full-bred Scottish terrier. Now at this point, some of you might be thinking, that's all very nice, but why is Fala important? And why are artifacts associated with him in the Roosevelt Museum's collections? Well, for starters, during World War II, Fala became the most famous dog in America. And in 1944, as I will demonstrate, he had a surprising role in FDR's campaign for a fourth term as America's president. I also believe Fala's story offers us interesting glimpses into Franklin Roosevelt's personal side. But before I get to all of that, I want to say a few words about presidents and their dogs. Many of America's presidents have found friendship and solace in dogs. It's a tradition that goes all the way back to George Washington, who bred foxhounds. Among our more recent presidents, many people remember Buddy, Bill Clinton's Labrador retriever. Barney, one of a pair of Scottish terriers beloved by George W. Bush. And Barack Obama's Portuguese water dog, Bo. Franklin Roosevelt was no exception when it came to keeping a canine pet at the White House. In fact, FDR had a lifelong affection for dogs. They were a constant presence in his life from his early childhood. One of our earliest photographs of FDR is this charming image of the future president at age 3 aboard a donkey with his dog Budgie. And here is FDR in his teenage years with his dog Monk, that's the large dog on the left, and Tip, the smaller dog pictured with FDR on the right. Dogs continued to be a part of FDR's life as he grew to adulthood. Here we see FDR and Eleanor Roosevelt relaxing with their young daughter Anna and their dog Duffy, who they had acquired in Europe during their honeymoon. Other dogs would follow in the decades to come. One that was especially beloved by the Roosevelt family was a German shepherd named Chief. Here Chief sits alongside then Governor Roosevelt outside the Roosevelt home in Hyde Park in 1930. But while FDR owned a number of dogs during his lifetime, without question, the best known was Fala, the Scottish terrier he was given in August 1940. Fala was presented to FDR when he was 4 months old by Margaret Suckley, the president's distant cousin and close confidant. His original name was Big Boy, but FDR renamed him Murray the Outlaw of Fala Hill, after a Scottish ancestor. That's the name that was listed on this registration certificate from the American Kennel Club. However, over time, the dog's nickname, Fala, became the one that FDR and the public used. The president took an immediate and strong liking to Fala, who quickly became his constant companion. He slept in a special chair at the foot of the president's bed, and every morning he had a bone that was brought up on the president's breakfast tray. Throughout the day, Fala would often beg for food from the White House staff, who enjoyed giving him treats. But when the dog started putting on too much weight, the president issued orders that only he could feed him. In this photo, taken in FDR's private study at the White House, you can see the president holding up Fala's food dish. The ball and stuffed sock you saw at the start of this program were also kept in this room at the White House, and were 2 of Fala's favorite toys. Now, as I noted earlier, Fala quickly became President Roosevelt's constant companion. Consequently, during World War II, he often popped up in photographs of FDR at historic moments or with famous people. For instance, here he is sitting with FDR during the August 1941 Atlantic Conference, one of President Roosevelt's famous meetings with Winston Churchill. That's Churchill to the left of FDR in the photo, and the mound of dark fur you see at FDR's feet is Fala. And here is Fala at the Second Quebec Conference, held in Canada during the summer of 1944. That's Canadian Prime Minister Mackenzie King looking on while Eleanor Roosevelt feeds Fala a treat. In this 1941 photo, our intrepid terrier mixes company with Prime Minister Winston Churchill and FDR's trusted aide Harry Hopkins on the lawn outside the White House. Fala often traveled with the president during vacations and inspection tours. Here he is riding alongside FDR during a visit to a military base. In fact, over time, Fala became so closely associated with FDR that the Secret Service gave him the code name the Informer. That's because if you saw Fala, it was likely the president was somewhere nearby. That was sometimes the case when FDR traveled by train. Here you see the president with Fala and another dog on the rear platform of the presidential train. During station stops, an aide would often take Fala out on a short walk on the train platform, where he was sometimes spotted and recognized by members of the public. Now, all of this public exposure eventually led to media coverage. Photos and press accounts about Fala appeared in newspapers and magazines around the nation, and FDR's dog became a familiar figure to millions of Americans. This is a typical article taken from the New York Herald Tribune, in which the reporter described Fala as the first dog of the land. Here Fala has turned the tables on newspaper photographers in an amusing photo shot on the White House grounds. As Fala's fame spread, he became the subject of books, including this 1942 picture book titled The True Story of Fala. He even starred in 2 MGM newsreels shown in movie theaters, Fala, the President's Dog, and Fala at Hyde Park. Fala's growing popularity is reflected in the thousands of letters he received from the public. They are all preserved today among the papers stored at the Roosevelt Library. Many of these letters were related to Fala's role as honorary president of Barkers for Britain, an organization of dog owners created during World War II to raise funds to provide aid to the British people. This is the dog tag that was awarded to Fala by the group during the war. Now, earlier in this program, I mentioned that in addition to becoming the most famous dog in the United States, Fala also had a role in FDR's 1944 re-election campaign. That story begins in July 1944, when Fala accompanied the president on a trip across the Pacific Ocean for a meeting with military leaders in Hawaii. During the return trip from that meeting, FDR visited the Aleutian Islands before continuing on to the American mainland. When he got back to Washington, D.C., a rumor began circulating that Fala had been accidentally left behind on one of the Aleutian Islands, and that FDR had ordered the Navy to send a destroyer back to retrieve him. Well, as the presidential campaign heated up that fall, Republicans jumped on this rumor and accused the president of spending millions of taxpayer dollars in his effort to rescue Fala from the island. Now, the story was completely false, so FDR devised an amusing way to disarm his critics. The president chose his moment carefully. On September 23, 1944, he was scheduled to make his first important campaign speech at a labor union dinner attended by hundreds of union leaders. The speech was broadcast live across the nation. And instead of trying to recreate what FDR said, I'm going to let you listen to the actual speech as FDR uses devastating humor to demolish the Republican rumors about his dog Fala.
These Republican leaders have not been content with attacks on me, or on my wife, or on my son. No, not content with that. They now include my little dog, Fala. Well, of course, I don't resent attacks, and my family don't resent attacks, but Fala does resent them. You know, Fala's Scotch. And being a Scotty, as soon as he learned that the Republican fiction writers in Congress and out had concocted a story that I'd left him behind on an Aleutian island and had sent a destroyer back to find him at a cost to the taxpayers of $2 or $3 or $8 or $20 million, his Scotch soul was furious. He has not been the same dog since. I am accustomed to hearing malicious falsehoods about myself, such as that old worm-eaten chestnut that I have represented myself as indispensable. But I think I have a right to resent, to object to libelous statements about my dog.
Well, as you just heard, FDR brought down the House with what became known as his Fala speech. That speech served to energize his election campaign by showing the public that the president still had the magic political touch he had demonstrated in his previous 3 political campaigns for the presidency. In fact, historians often cite the Fala speech as a key moment in the 1944 election, one that helped to put Roosevelt on a path for re-election in November. Now, of course, just 6 months after that election, President Roosevelt died. And after the president's death in April 1945, Fala lived with Eleanor Roosevelt at her Valkill estate in Hyde Park. Here they are walking together on the grounds at Valkill. Fala lived happily there for the next 7 years. During those years, Fala grew a bit gray and also became largely deaf. Here he is with Mrs. Roosevelt in his later days. Ultimately, age and an accumulation of illnesses led to his death on April 5th, 1952. At Eleanor's direction, he was buried in the Rose Garden at Springwood, just a few feet away from FDR's grave. When we look back on the story of Fala, it's interesting to see how this small terrier became the best-known dog in the nation. So well recognized that President Roosevelt could make him the subject of a nationally broadcast speech. Like the dogs owned by other presidents, Fala also helped to humanize FDR. The American public loves dogs, and presidents seeking to make a personal connection with dog owners certainly can't go wrong by owning one. But in FDR's case, the fondness he demonstrated for Fala was not just political theater. The affection he had for the dog was genuine. These private photos taken at Hyde Park and in the president's White House study are evidence of that. And it's clear that this scruffy dog returned the favor, giving the president much-needed moments of relaxation and companionship amid the tremendous stresses of the war years, years when the loneliness of being commander-in-chief weighed heavily on FDR. In that sense, Fala played a small role in helping FDR and the nation through the difficult years of World War II. I hope you've enjoyed this program about FDR's dog Fala. I'll be back again soon to talk about the stories behind other interesting artifacts from the museum collection. If you want to learn more about our Fala artifacts and other objects in the museum, I encourage you to take our virtual museum tour and explore our digital artifact collection. Both are available on our website.